Welcome to our channel. If you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any of our spooky stories. I had heard the legends about the Winchester mansion my whole life. It was one of those places shrouded in mystery and terror, which everyone in town avoided even mentioning. But a few weeks ago, something happened that brought all that darkness to the surface. It all started with a group of friends. They were the adventurous type, always seeking a new adrenaline rush. One drunken night, someone suggested it would be a fun to explore the Winchester mansion. Amidst laughter and teasing, they decided they would go that very night. It was supposed to be a joke, a silly dare to see who had the courage to enter and leave without being caught by whatever was inside. But they never returned. When the police were called, all they found were their cars parked outside and their footprints leading to the mansion's entrance. No signs of struggle, no evidence of escape. Just silence and the vast darkness stretching inside the mansion. The town was in shock. The families of the missing were desperate, and panic began to spread. People started sharing stories about the mansion, tales whispered for generations. They spoke of vengeful spirits, disturbed souls trapped there by the mansion's strange design, built to confuse the dead. I was an amateur paranormal investigator, with a group of friends who shared the same fascination with the unknown. When we heard about the friend's disappearance, we felt an irresistible urge to find out what really happened. We decided we would investigate the Winchester mansion, not only to solve the mystery but also to face our own fears. That night, as we prepared to enter the mansion, the atmosphere was charged with palpable tension. Each of us carried a flashlight and a camera, trying to convince ourselves we were ready for whatever we might find inside. But deep down, we knew nothing could prepare us for what was to come. And so, with hearts pounding and an unsettling feeling in our stomachs, we took the first step inside the Winchester mansion, diving headfirst into a dark mystery that threatened to consume us completely. The first live view of the Winchester mansion was something no photo could capture. There it was, an immense wooden structure that seemed to stretch forever, with its Gothic towers and windows reflecting the moonlight like watchful eyes. It was as if the house was alive, breathing, observing our arrival. As we approached, the gate creaked as if warning us to stay away. But we were already committed. We had to know what happened to our friends. We pushed the gate and walked along the stone path leading to the main entrance. Each step seemed to echo in the night stillness, heightening the feeling that we were being watched. The front door, huge and ornate, gave way with a push, revealing an interior frozen in time. The furniture, covered in dust and cobwebs, told stories of a bygone era. There was a strange chill in the air, as if the mansion itself was welcoming us into its icy embrace. As we explored the entrance hall, the mansion's magnitude began to reveal itself. Hallways stretched infinitely, doors led to rooms where time seemed to have stopped. But it was more than that. There was something intangible, a presence that manifested in barely audible whispers and shadows moving at the corners of our eyes. The air was charged with a silent electricity. Each of us could feel it. As we advanced, the sensation of being watched intensified. It seemed the mansion was testing us, waiting to see if we would falter. But we pressed on, driven by both fear and determination. In the back of my mind, I knew the mansion wasn't just a bizarre construction. It was a labyrinth designed to confuse and imprison. Every hallway, every door seemed built to disorient, to make us lose our sense of direction. And amid this, The stories of the mansion's construction came to mind. The widow Sarah Winchester, obsessed with the idea that she was being pursued by the spirits of those killed by her husband's guns. Built incessantly, without a clear plan, the mansion was a monument to fear and guilt. And now, we were trapped in its web. Whatever was there, the spirits or shadows, were waiting to devour us. But it wasn't too late yet. Or at least, that's what we hoped. As we crossed the entrance hall and ventured into the corridors, the mansion's already charged atmosphere seemed to grow even more oppressive. Each step made the floorboards creak, each movement seemed to echo through the walls, as if the house was whispering forgotten secrets. The first strange thing happened almost immediately. One of the doors, which we were sure was locked, slowly opened with a low, prolonged groan. At first, we thought it was the wind, but there was no draft. Inside, the room was intact, as if it had been suddenly abandoned. Personal items scattered on the table, an unmade bed, a closed window that allowed no breeze in. Something or someone was inviting us in. As we explored, the strange sensations intensified. The flashlight beams flickered, creating shadows that seemed to take on a life of their own. At one point, I saw a figure quickly pass by the corner of my eye. When I turned, there was nothing, only emptiness and gloom. My friend Sarah, who had always been the most skeptical of the group, was beginning to lose her composure. Did you hear that?" as she whispered, pointing to a staircase leading to the second floor. We stood still, listening, and then we heard it, faint but unmistakable footsteps slowly ascending the stairs. But no one was there. Only us, standing, hearts pounding in our chests. We decided to follow the sound. Each step we took seemed to echo through the mansion, as if we were alerting the spirits of our presence. Upstairs, things got even more bizarre. Doors opened and closed on their own. Furniture moved slightly as if someone had pushed it just a little. Sarah began to tremble, and I confess I was feeling a fear I had never experienced before. Then we found the first clue. An old notebook, lying on the floor of one of the rooms. It was covered in dust, but still legible. The pages were diaries of one of the missing friends. He described strange sensations, sightings of shadowy figures, and most disturbingly, the feeling of being constantly watched and followed. There were drawings too, quick sketches of distorted faces, skeletal hands, empty eyes. As we read, the atmosphere around us seemed to grow even heavier. The temperature dropped abruptly, and we could see our breath condensing in the air. Suddenly, the flashlight beams went out simultaneously, plunging us into total darkness. That's when we heard it, a whisper soft and ominous, seemed to come from all directions at once. You shouldn't be here," said the voice, in a tone that made our blood run cold. At that moment, we all knew. We weren't alone in the Winchester mansion, and the spirits that inhabited it were not happy with our presence. The feeling of absolute terror took hold of us, and we knew our exploration had turned into a fight for survival. The darkness was complete. Fear seeped into our bones, but we knew we couldn't stop. The flashlights finally came back on, casting a shaky, weak glow, but enough to see the path ahead. We were determined to uncover the truth, even if it meant facing our worst nightmares. Walking down the main corridor of the second floor, we noticed something curious, a door that seemed different from the others. It was heavier, more elaborate, with inscriptions we couldn't understand. We pushed the door, which opened with a loud creak, revealing a hidden room. The air was thick and hard to breathe, as if the room hadn't been opened for decades. Inside, we found a secret library. Shelves full of old books, many of them about occultism and rituals. On a table in the center of the room was a large, leather-bound diary. It was the diary of Sarah Winchester, the family matriarch. We sat around the table and began to read, hoping to find answers. The diary's pages revealed dark secrets. Sarah believed that the spirits of people killed by Winchester rifles were after her. To appease these spirits, she built incessantly, creating a labyrinth of corridors and rooms with no apparent logic, all to confuse and trap the vengeful spirits. But there was more. The diary detailed rituals performed to try to communicate with the dead, to understand their intentions and somehow find peace. It described entire nights of seances, with candles, symbols, and mysterious chants. Sarah believed there were particularly malevolent spirits trapped in the mansion that could never be appeased. As we read, we began to hear soft murmurs around us. Whispers that seemed to come from the walls, the floor, the very air. Indistinct words that turned into a terrifying chorus. We quickly closed the diary, but the sound didn't stop. The spirits knew we were reading their secrets, and they weren't happy. Suddenly, one of the shelves moved, revealing a hidden passage. Hesitation was present in all of us, but we knew we had to move forward. The passage led us to a narrow, dark corridor with steps descending into what seemed to be the heart of the mansion. We descended, each step increasing the feeling of fear and oppression. At the end of the corridor, we reached a large underground room, full of strange symbols and occult artifacts. In the center of the room was an altar. It was clear that many rituals had been performed there. The walls were covered in writings in a language we couldn't decipher, but the energy in the room was palpable, almost suffocating. That's when the spirits manifested. Translucent apparitions began to appear around us, faces contorted in agony, skeletal hands reaching for us. We could feel the hatred and pain emanating from them. We were surrounded, and there was nowhere to run. We realized that the only way to get out alive was to understand and fulfill the spirit's last wish. But how could we know what they wanted? Sarah's diary mentioned a final ritual, one she never managed to complete. We decided that our only chance was to try to finish it, hoping it would bring peace to the tormented souls. As we prepared the ritual, the spirits grew more agitated. The air seemed to vibrate with a malevolent energy, and the walls seemed to close in around us. But we had no choice. It was our only hope of survival. With the ritual prepared, we knew we couldn't make any mistakes. The instructions in Sarah Winchester's diary were clear but complex. Each step needed to be followed meticulously, or we risked angering the spirits even more. The first part of the ritual required us to draw a large circle on the ground using salt and ashes. In the center, we placed candles in precise positions, forming an ancient and unknown pattern to us. The candles flickered, casting dancing shadows on the walls, bringing the terrifying figures around us to life. As I recited the words of the incantation, the others prepared the final symbols. The words were in a dead language, difficult to pronounce, but the energy in the room seemed to react to every syllable I uttered. We felt the air grow denser, almost suffocating, and the spirits around us grew more frantic. Suddenly, a cold wind blew through the room, extinguishing all the candles at once. We were in total darkness, with only the sounds of the spirits' whispers and moans filling the space. We felt invisible hands pulling at our clothes, trying to drag us away from the circle of protection. Keep going, please, keep going," shouted Sarah, holding my hand tightly. I resumed the incantation, now with more urgency, trying to relight the candles one by one. Each time a flame ignited, the room seemed to vibrate, as if the spirits were fighting against the light.
Then it happened.
The last part of the ritual involved a symbolic sacrifice, a personal item belonging to one of the missing friends. We found a bracelet that had been left behind and placed it in the center of the circle, reciting the final words of the incantation. The reaction was immediate and violent. The room seemed to explode in light and sound, as if a storm had been unleashed inside the mansion. The spirits screamed, a cacophony of pain and anger, while the floor trembled beneath our feet. It felt as if the entire mansion was disintegrating around us. But then, as quickly as it started, everything stopped. A deafening silence took over, and for a moment, we thought we had failed. But slowly, the room began to change. The apparitions disappeared, their forms fading like smoke in the wind. The air became lighter, and we could breathe again. But our joy was short-lived. We realized that although the spirits had been temporarily appeased, something was still very wrong. The mansion would not let us go so easily. The doors that were once open were now locked, and the corridors seemed to stretch infinitely, changing shape each time we tried to find the exit. Then came the most terrible revelation. The walls of the mansion were covered with symbols that hadn't been there before. Messages left by the spirits, warnings that our presence had awakened something even darker and older than them. We were trapped in the Winchester mansion, and now, the fight wasn't just against the spirits but against the house itself. An ancient and powerful entity that fed on fear and despair and was now hungry for our souls. Our only hope was to keep fighting, searching for an exit we might never find, while the mansion whispered promises of eternal agony to us. The silence was crushing. The echo of the spirit's screams still hung in the air, but now there was something more, a presence, an entity that revealed itself in the shadows. The Winchester mansion had captured us in its labyrinth, and every attempt to escape brought us back to the starting point. The mansion seemed alive, changing its corridors and rooms to keep us trapped. As we wandered aimlessly, the feeling of being watched never left us. The whispers were now louder, clearer, as if the walls were speaking directly to us. "You will never leave," said an icy voice, sending chills down our spines. We knew we couldn't simply give up. We had to find a way to escape. Our flashlights were almost out of battery, and the darkness became increasingly oppressive. In a moment of desperation, we found a door we hadn't seen before. We opened it, revealing a steep staircase descending into the depths of the mansion. We had no choice. We started to descend, each step echoing like a death drum. At the bottom of the stairs, we found a cavernous basement. The atmosphere was suffocating, laden with the smell of mold and decay. In the center of the basement was a circle of ancient stones covered with arcane symbols. It looked like a sacrificial altar, a place of ancient and evil rituals. And it was there that we finally understood the extent of the terror we were facing. Suddenly, the entire mansion began to shake as if it were reconfiguring itself once again. The floor opened, revealing a bottomless abyss. Sarah fell to her knees, overcome with fear, while the rest of us tried to keep her standing. We heard screams and wails coming from the abyss, lost souls that never found peace. Then the entity manifested. A gigantic shadow rose from the abyss, eyes glowing like embers. Its presence was overwhelming, draining our energy and hope. You dared to enter my abode, the voice reverberated, deep and cavernous. Now, you belong to me. We felt our strength fading, as if our very life was being sucked out of our bodies. But in the last moment of despair, I remembered something I had read in Sarah Winchester's diary. A final ritual, a chance to seal the entity back into the abyss. It was risky, but our only hope. With the last of our strength, we began to recite the words of the final incantation. The entity writhed, trying to interrupt us, but we persevered. The ground shook more violently, and cracks began to form around us. Ethereal lights started emanating from the circle of stones, and the shadow was pulled back into the abyss. With a final scream, the entity was sealed, and the ground closed. The trembling stopped, and a profound silence took over. We were exhausted but alive. We knew we had succeeded, but at the same time, the mansion had changed. We felt that a part of us had stayed behind, an eternal connection with the place. When we finally found the exit, the light of dawn seemed unreal. We were free but forever marked by the experience. Each of us left different, darker, haunted by what we had seen and done. But the story doesn't end there. Since that night, each of us began to feel something strange. Whispers in the darkness, shadows that move on their own. The mansion still watched us, even from afar, and we knew that somehow, it would never completely let us go. Today, I tell this story as a warning. Do not underestimate the power of the unknown. The Winchester mansion is still there, waiting, luring new explorers with its promises of mystery and terror. And once you enter, you will never be the same. Because the mansion always remembers and never lets its prey escape completely.